What is going on, everybody? Happy Thursday. Welcome to our normal Thursday show now. We've got Brandon and myself, which I love. It's a great change up. Brandon is very, I think goes about things in a very different way than I do. And it's great. I think we have a nice little back and forth. So, Brandon, great to be with you, man. How are you doing today?
Doing good. I think
Yeah.
it's going to be a really fun slate to break down. I think I unlike the previous one we did on Monday or whatever, like I think
Yeah.
this is a really fun slate for Showdown.
hmm Yeah, I think it is a good one for Showdown. I think there's a lot of different. I even noticed I ran a few sims with Saber Sim and everything, and it was giving me a lot of different things that I was not even different. It's just like it was like trying to get me basically to lock in neighbors as captain, which I just felt like a little bit ambivalent to do. But obviously I'm gonna be over the field on him anyway. But it's interesting. So why don't you start off with your general thoughts, and then I'll share my screen and talk about a little bit what I'm doing.
So my general thoughts: one, we've mentioned, or maybe not me, but other people in the industry have mentioned that, when we were looking at optimals these past couple of years, and you saw the percentages lean towards wide receivers and tight ends being, working out more, and the field normally playing quarterbacks and stuff. Well, now it's kind of swung the pendulum in the other direction, so where people aren't playing quarterbacks in the captain percentage. And you look back at a situation with Rodgers, who was the optimal captain at like 5%, and typically those types of games or those outcomes aren't likely to happen, but the field isn't playing them relative to like the percentage of it happening. Like normally it's going to hit like 10 11%, then it'll lean like wide receivers or whatever. But you get a situation where like Rodgers was like you know a cheap play and wasn't owned at all. And when you look at a slate like this, to where I think there's really only four realistic captains you can use, and
Hmm.
that would most likely be Lamb, Neighbors, Daniel Jones, and possibly the tight end from
Ferguson.
DAL, yeah, Ferguson. Like those seem to be like the only four guys who I think are somewhat viable in the captain. And when I was looking at the different builds, uh, usually we see, in terms of sim ROI, we usually see at least one type of build leaning towards like 31% cash rate, 29% cash rate, whatever. At least I'm seeing that all four of those builds, and really anything between, like from 5-1 Dallas to 4-2, Giants, a lot of these lineups are landing like right at like 25% cash rate to like 20% cash rate. So we're not seeing one, you know, way to build leaning heavily towards like, oh, this is the way that, the content's going to pay out and whatnot. So like that's the first thing that I saw. I don't know if you've seen that as well since you've been
So
goofing around.
yeah, I have a very different take. So I'm curious. I'm interested because I actually felt like this is a reasonable slate to spread out at captain, especially it being a Thursday night game with some variance. Us not knowing, we still don't have official word on Darius Slayton yet, which I guess is a little bit of a factor. But I mean, that actually could be a decent sized factor. But I actually found that there were some builds that I quite liked with spending down a little bit at captain, and I guys like Wandale Robinson. I actually think on Thursday night games like this, especially with Dallas and their kicking game, I think Brandon Aubrey is completely legitimate. The guy can score like 20 fantasy points. There's no reason why I wouldn't cross him off. I feel like there's a lot of guys who I came across, at least in my studying for the game, that I felt comfortable using as captain. So I actually am a little more spread out at captain tonight. Although the ones you mentioned, are certainly the main ones that I'm getting.
And Robinson would have been the fifth one out of that when I was
Yeah.
mentioning the four guys. Like I think it's those five if you include Robinson. For me, I'm probably going to personally lean towards playing a 4-2 Giants, leaning with Jones and the captain, only because you can very easily, like, I think we're all playing Lamb, right? Like, that's the one guy you probably put in the flex. You can play Lamb, Neighbors, and Robinson together, and I think you have a really good shot at actually cashing and making quite a lot of money with that, because you can go Aubrey for the last, well, one of the last two
Mm-hmm.
positions. You can go Ferguson, you can go Singletary. Um,
Mm-hmm.
the fact that we have Tracy at 2,800, who is realistically, taking snap share away from Singletary, that means he's in play at 2,800. We have The fourth wide receiver, if Slayton is out, at 600 for the Giants, and the third running back from Dallas, who I would argue is in play if you're, trying to get a majority of the spin up guys and then just play, a 300 or a 3-digit, punt play in terms of salary. Like I think I really don't see the reason to play anybody like in the 3K range, like, Joseph from the Giants, even the Giants defense and stuff like that. Like, I think this is very much a pay up for 4 to 5 guys and then just like go to the bottom with, like Wandale should easily be like the fourth guy in your lineup. Like, you should easily be able to have like 3 10,000 plus guys in your lineup tonight.
Yeah, I agree with that 100%. That you could definitely do that. I was looking at the min. So Jalen Hyatt question's coming up already, and I guess we'll address it. One, let's keep an eye out and see what happens with Darius Slayton. 2, are we trying to make Jalen Hyatt a thing? And even if he catches 1 touchdown, is that 8 points going to be good enough, or 9 points, or whatever it would be, depending on where he caught it from? I don't know. Like I feel like sort of like you said, I don't really have a ton of interest in this. I mean, if Slayton's out, he certainly could hit Hyatt for a bomb, but we're talking about a guy who hasn't caught a ball this season as if he's like some sort of incredible sneaky play. I don't really know that I agree. If you get stuck and you need to spend 1,000 or less, I don't mind the idea of using him, but I don't really know that you're going to have to do that with most of the builds, at least like you said, that I'm getting to, because I did not get to, when I was running some stuff, I did not get to any Jalen Hyatt right now, but I have some weird plays that, like Jacob Johnson for the tight end for the Giants. I could see him that, there being a design play near the goal line or something for him. But still, like, I feel like even those guy plays seem just as good as Hyatt to me. I mean, Hyatt's not going to go out there and catch 10 passes. Now watch, he's going to go do it. But like, it just feels like a lot of people want to do this Hyatt thing. And I'm kind of trying to figure out exactly why. And Depop is saying here in there, he's not going to have any running back captains or DAC captains for his 20 max. That's fine. I personally don't understand why we wouldn't play the running game against Dallas. Dallas has been completely torched, has not shown any ability to stop the run whatsoever. Having said that, I do think the Cowboys are going to win this game fairly handily. That's my personal take. I like the Cowboys. I like the Cowboys to cover. And we know Daniel Jones has never won a game on Thursday night, I don't think, in his life. I don't think he's ever won a primetime game in his life, actually, to be honest with you. It's after a short week. Dallas is in must-win mode. They're a much more talented team in basically every facet of the game than the Giants are, and I am leaning that way in terms of what my take on the game is. However, for DFS purposes, I do think you're getting a little bit different by playing the more 4-2 and potentially even 5-1 Giants stacks. I also have a lot of exposure to the Cowboys defense. I'm going to take a little bit of my input in there, but just what I think is going to happen in the game. But overall, I think a good way to get different is to try to be overweight the Giants. Do you sort of agree with that or not? Just as a way to get different. I'm not saying forget like what I think is going to happen in the game.
Yeah, it's, especially when we're looking or, going back, there really isn't a certain build that really leans towards caching more so than the other one. And typically whenever you see that, I use it more in esports because when there are two teams who are their odds are very close together. I mean, you could argue that, the 5 points here isn't close, but typically you almost always want to play the underdog in that sense if the outcomes are very, very close to one another.
Right.
And so, like, in terms of DFS today, like, I think playing more Giants, and not only just that in general, like, Giants are cheaper. Like, you can get Robinson and Neighbors together, like, hello,
Right.
even if you're not playing Jones, like, those two seem like Robinson seems like one of the best plays on the slate from like a build perspective, from a salary perspective. We're already playing Neighbors. Like, unless he gets injured, he's most likely going to score at least like 17 points. The fact that those are two Giants right off the bat, and the fact that, Daniel Jones is also cheap. Like, I think if anything today, you should at least have just 3 3s or 4 2s in favor of Giants. Like, those are the builds that I probably use.
Yeah. I hear you there. I think that makes some sense. I do find myself more on these Thursdays looking at backup running backs usually, which actually kind of is Zeke in this case. It's really Dowdle's job, I think, now more so.
Mhm.
I like to look at the kicking game a lot more on these Thursday nights, and I usually like to bet the unders on the Thursday night games, and it's worked pretty well for me so far. So that's that. Those are all the things that I'm angling. I'm more on the defense and kicking game than I usually am for most slates. Are you getting to that? Are you getting to? And we talked about Aubrey for sure, but anybody other than Aubrey, any backup running backs that you like specifically? Anybody that you're interested in, or are you just finding you don't really need to do that?
Well, I think Aubrey is going to carry way more ownership than any kicker we've seen this year on
Yeah.
a showdown game, and also because the salary is much tighter now. We're in week
Mhm.
4, so like we're not going to have soft salary until like Thanksgiving and the playoffs and stuff. So kickers, the ownership towards kickers should really start to coordinate to them versus random wide receivers or whatever beside them. Like I think we'll start seeing higher ownership on kickers, especially Aubrey today. I mean, the guy's basically scoring the exact same as a wide receiver one for most teams, um, and he's 5,000. Like I think a lot of people are going to go to him, um, and really like my last decision today is if I'm playing Tracy
Mhm.
because him at 28. Like, and he's projected for a decent point. Like, Saverson
Mhm.
has him for 4.5. Like, that's a pretty significant projection for a wide receiver too at that price tag. Uh,
Mhm.
we already like Singletary. The fact that you can pretty much get direct leverage off of the chalk running back, and I think you can. This is usually how I decide if I'm going to not play a running back. I think I can survive one Devin Singletary touchdown if I don't have him.
Mhm.
If he scores 2 or gets like 85 yards, whatever, then it's over. But I think if Singletary does like 60 yards without touchdown, 80 yards without touchdown, I'm fine. If he
Mhm.
does one touchdown and then like 60, 70 yards on the ground, I think I can still survive that and not necessarily need him. And then by just having Tracy on there is the direct like leverage point. So
Mhm.
that's like my take today.
Mhm. I certainly think that makes some sense. And, we got a question here from Deep Hope's asking you. They said, Brandon, if the Cowboys defense tightens up, wouldn't that boost the Giants kicker? Most of the industry is only talking about Aubrey, who's great, but I'd rather take shares of the Giants kicker over their tight end, for example. So Giants tight end versus kicker. We're talking about Greg Joseph here, and what's his name? Theo Johnson? No, who are we counting as the tight end for? Yeah, it is. I guess it is Theo Johnson as the. I don't think that we brought up Theo Johnson though at all.
Let me look. Let me look. Well, I mean, one, they're not even in the same salary level.
Yeah, I don't really see that as being a.
At least for me, that's not like a one for one. Like I'm choosing this guy over this guy because if you're in this range, I'm assuming one or last two guys in like from Aubrey at 5,000 to Joseph at 600 or 600 lower. Like that's not a big decision. Like you can change your lineup to get there. You in this range, you just have Aubrey, Joseph, Giants defense, Slayton, and Tracy. Like I don't think you need to get all the way down to Theo Johnson, and I would implore you to play Tracy straight up versus Theo. I think Tracy's a way. I think he
I
just
agree
has.
with that. I'm on board with the Tracy for sure. I just want to point out something that Deep Hope does that a lot of people say a lot of the time. We're going to pivot off this guy, okay? Yeah, to pivot off of Aubrey, we'll use Robinson and Joseph. Well, Robinson's going to be more owned than Aubrey is, and Joseph is projected to be 1% less. So it's 19 versus 20% less ownership. So you're not getting anything different, or 18 and a half versus 20 and a half. 18 and a half versus 20.7. I don't think you're getting different at all by doing those things. So don't think that you're doing something different by making those little substitutions. I think there's a lot of different ways to get different. I like your Tracy idea. I like the idea of both kickers because that's going to be less of a common build. I like the idea of the Cowboys defense in there with that. But the main thing is I want to get to as much Dak, CD, and one of Neighbors or Singletary. I'll throw Jones in the mix. One of Nabler, Singletary, and Jones, and then I'm trying to figure out my other three pieces mostly. I mean, that's basically what we're going to do, right? We're going to be playing those guys in most of our lineups, right? At least CD, Dak, and one of those Giants, whichever one you choose.
Yeah, and I think it's going to be an extremely close scoring slate based on all the lineups that we're looking at and the different captains. Like they all are scoring very, very similar to each other.
Mhm.
And so not only are we with that, we really, at least for me on this one, I really don't want a zero. Typically, I'm not really concerned, like, oh, whatever, I play a guy who's 600 and scores me zero. I really don't want a zero today from any of my guys. And the fact, as I said, like, you can get Jones, Captain, Lamb, Neighbors, Robinson, and then you can go like Aubrey or however you want to go. Like that's the build that I want. Like I want at least guys who can. I want my lowest score at the end of the day to be like Tracy with like 3 to 4 points. Um,
Mhm.
I think if you're doing anything like, this is why I don't like Theo or whatever. Like, I think Theo has a real chance of scoring you 2 or 0 points today.
Yeah, I think
Um,
zero is a very likely outcome.
yeah, like today's not a slate that I want to even take the risk of having somebody who's going to score me is either going to be bad point per dollar or score me a zero. And
Mhm.
so I'm probably going to play as many of the chalkier guys as possible in this game.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that makes sense. Got a question about the FanDuel, touch on FanDuel. I know, I'm sure you're not playing on FanDuel. I never play FanDuel for Showdown because I think it's a joke, and I'm kind of disgusted by the product that they haven't improved it by now, personally. I thought they could have made it a lot better than what they've done. In fact, I think both these things could. I think there's no reason not to add a seventh player on FanDuel if you're going to do it the system that they're doing. I don't understand why they do it the way they do. The only thing I would say on FanDuel is I would make sure to try to leave at least 3,000 or 4,000 on the table. I would do whatever I can to try and get different because it is so hard to get different on FanDuel with the way that they have their showdowns. Personally, I don't like them at all.
So I know we talked off screen in one of our work meetings this week, but like how I had a bunch of like random vouchers on FanDuel this past
Yeah.
week I played. I mean I had some for the freaking game tonight. So
Oh,
I'm
really?
just playing for free again on FanDuel. Um and so I mean I'll talk about that really fast. Like I
Yeah.
think DAL's a really good play at $8,000. I think you want to try and prioritize clearly having Lamb in there. And personally, I would run Neighbors in the what is it called, champion or whatever, the 1.5 or the captain. My bad, the captain presented just because he is at the moment for fantasy points across the season and across the board. Like he is the best projected fantasy player in the NFL right now,
Mhm.
based on his usage, his catches. Um, and the slight change that FanDuel has made to their scoring today, like I would play Neighbors captain, Daniel Jones, Lamb, DAL, and then whatever you want as your last guy. Like that's what I would do, and that's what I'm doing. I'm actually just running like the same lineup in all the lines that I have that I'm
Yeah.
playing with my tickets or vouchers or whatever they gave me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, I look. If I had some vouchers for it, I would play it.
Yeah.
That's what it would take. I cannot stand doing the FanDuel ones. It drives me nuts. But that's just my own issue with FanDuel because I just don't understand why we don't improve it. In fact, I actually think that DraftKings should just why not say F it and just add a seventh player. I know people like this showdowns like that, but wouldn't it be interesting? Like, I think you'd have a really cool thing to have a seventh player in there. Really, really allows you to do some different stuff. I don't know. Personally, that's what I would like to see in the future. Partly I'm biased because the early days of DFS there were these sites, Fantasy Feud, and all these other ones that you could like. You're creating like 15 people lineups for NFL Sundays, and
Mhm.
I freaking loved it. I absolutely loved it. They would do positionless for baseball. They would run tournaments where there was no salary. It was
Oh
so
wow.
fun and so cool. And I'm biased because I don't know what happened during that period of time, why I was so dialed in, but I like didn't lose for like a year and a half on those
Mhm.
sites and made a fortune, built a huge bankroll from that. So maybe I'm just biased and I want to go back to it. I'm going to say for just to go through my exposure for what I'm going to probably have. This is like from a build I did earlier, but my actual biggest buy-in, I am playing Robinson as captain. I think he actually has enough upside, and you can get in 4 of those 10K pluses if you do that. You kind of have to go that you might have to do the Tracy thing or something like that with it, but I kind of like that idea, or 490, whatever,
Mhm.
down and up, basically, I guess is what I would say. He's 77, what is he, 69? 64, sorry. Dowdle and up. So 64, I guess Dowdle or for Ferguson and up, but then you get the Lamb, Dak, and either Neighbors or Jones or something like that. I also think like this is, again, I'm going to just reemphasize that I do like the Ferguson play at tight end. It's going to be fairly owned. So is the Dowdle play. But I really like the idea of getting to more of the Aubrey. And when we get out of here, I think I'm going to go for that actually a little bit. it would not surprise me in a slate like this if he was one of the higher scoring. The only thing that drives me nuts, though, is that let's say the game script goes the way that I think it does, and the Cowboys are just pummeling them. The Cowboys are great front runners. When they're favored to win by like 5 or 6 and they're playing an inferior team over the past years, like my joke is always like, well, just bet them like minus like 18 then. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
They will run it up on you, and they will get, they'll get CeeDee Lamb his he had a down week last week. They'll get CeeDee Lamb his big week in those kind of situations. So I really like the idea of look, I know it sounds really obvious, but like making sure to get the 75 plus, maybe higher of your lineups with CD, Dak, and either Aubrey, the defense, or both. And then I'm trying to decide my usual, for most of my builds, for most of my hand builds, it'll be deciding between one of these giants, whether it's Jones, Neighbors, Singletary. And that's really the giants that I have the most interest in. But for my scripting, I did get to a lot of different funky stuff where I had a lot more giants 4-2 and 5-1, just because it's a good way to get different than the field. All right, we got a bunch of people in here, guys. We love seeing this. Every time Brandon pops in there, just the numbers go through the roof. So please click the like while you're here and subscribe. Also want to remind everybody, this is the last week of the NFL promo. So we have our promo code 24 for 24% off the first month, and the yearly 10% off of the full year with NFL yearly as the promo code. And it's down at the bottom of the screen. I do encourage people to check it out. We also still are running the 1099. So you can check out you get the entire SaberSim, the ultimate package, combined with all of our stuff. But it's a pretty awesome deal. And we're literally charging, before the promo, we're charging a fraction more than SaberSim. After the promo, we're actually charging less for the current time being. So if you're interested in joining us, now is the time to do it. Wanted to throw that out there as I have to. All right, Brendan, what didn't we touch on other than the fact that we don't know if Darius Slayton is active. So that news just came in, and that's good because I don't need to change much now.
So I mentioned that I think I can survive a Singletary touchdown, but my feel on the slate is I think I can get away with not playing Prescott.
Okay.
I know you're playing him, but
I'm heavy on him, but I understand.
Yeah. And I was mainly going to ask, like, who do you feel more confident of not having exposure to, or either below the field or just not having in general?
So it's weird because I'm overweight on him right now, but in terms of the captain. But I think I'm significantly going to be underweight by the time I get through the end of my builds. Will probably be Neighbors, just because the field is playing him at an insane rate, and Dallas will double him, and they'll make the other guys beat him. And it's I can play the Wando Robinson with Daniel Jones if I want to, or I can play Rondo Robinson, with a Singletary. And that's sort of what I think is a guy I think you can escape. I mean, Neighbors, at this price, like, he's more expensive than Dak. Now he has probably the highest ceiling other than Lamb. Well, he definitely has the highest ceiling other than Lamb. I guess you could argue Dak, but it's a lot for him to get there. He's the one who stands out as being the guy who but again, I don't really find myself wanting to fade him. I think you could get away with not having Brandon Cooks if he scores a touchdown because of his price. He's a little bit higher priced. I also think he's an interesting contrarian play, but the guys I'm sort of lower on in my builds, I'm just going to look at my exposure right now versus this from the top end. Let's see.
While you do that, it's mentioned that you do say, or that we both use the word survive. That's typically, whenever I say fade, that's usually the logic that I'm using of, I think I can survive if he hits and I don't have him. That's normally how I look at stuff.
Right. I think that makes perfect sense. I think you could argue Singletary, depending on how. I mean, one touchdown, like you said, I think that's you could probably survive without that. You could probably survive that fade. Or I don't know. I'm trying to change the language a little bit. But mostly, I feel like I'm pretty high on the spend ups because I think there is enough value in my hand builds. Like I said, my first build had Wando Robinson as the captain. I am willing to play Rico Dowdle as the captain. I'm willing to play Brandon Aubrey. So I'm not really needing to fade overall the spend ups as much because I am playing these other funky plays in the captain. And I think it's going to be a funky game. We see it all the time with these guys. The only thing that worries me is the Dallas running it up thing. And if they do, I guess it doesn't worry me. I just was very aware. I want to make sure I have more CD and Dak in the field because I've seen this story so many times throughout the last 5 years. And it was really frustrating when it happened on Sunday and cost me like over 50K because that stupid comeback, that garbage time, like literally they had no business even being on the field. The same situation the week before, they weren't on the field. And then this time they brought them all back out. So maybe I'm just being vengeful, but that's where I'm at. Like I have no natural interest in Zeke, but I'm interested in the low ownership. I don't know, man. I'm trying to find my big differentiators. Most of them for me are going to be in the captain spot by playing those other guys I mentioned. Get the 3 to 5% owned captains and play 15% of 3 of those guys, and that's more what I'm doing. You know, CD's my highest owned player, but the majority of that he's hardly in any of my captains right now, which does worry me a little bit. But at the same time, at this ownership for a wide receiver, the general rule is like I always like to have wide receivers in my captain spot, but that's usually because they're lower owned than the quarterbacks. When they're the highest owned player, there's just enough variance for me to look other directions, especially in a must win. So if CD does put up a monster game, I think he's going to have to do some of it late because I think the Giants are going to come out there and prepared to stop him. And that's, it doesn't mean he can't go off anyway, but that's what I think they're going to be prepared for. I don't think they're going to be prepared for Dak to spread it out. All right. I guess I was trying to answer your question, but it was kind of hard for me to figure out how to exactly answer it the best way I could. I can't really find. It is interesting that Darius Slayton, as a captain option, I don't mind that gamble, but I don't love it. I think we get with these Giants receivers, they've played way too many like primetime games over the last few years because I feel like we've gotten very familiar with all their receivers and stuff. And mostly it's because they're always like minimum priced. And all I can say is these guys are usually super cheap for a real reason, Darius Slayton, he's got 1 pass last week. He has a total his highest scoring game of the year, 6 fantasy points. Just give me Wan'Dale Robinson, spend up a little bit more, I think. I mean, sure, this could be a week where it's different, but I just think I'd rather go the other ways. I'm just trying to think of interesting ways to get different because I actually feel like this might be the one. I think there's so many ways to go, but I actually look at my builds right now and I'm looking at my exposures, and I think I'm closer to the chalk than I normally am for a showdown slate outside of the Aubrey captains, outside of the mid-tier guys as captains. Dowdle, I know it only says 6% on here that I've got, but actually it is 9% that I've got. But actually, I've got 15% Dowdle captains. I don't know. I'm getting overweight those mid-tier plays to use the three 10K pluses in my flex. That's my overall strategy, I guess, tonight.
I do want to add really fast, at least for me, I wanted to work on the fact that I wanted to remove the biases that I had towards like the old Giants and stuff because they don't have Barkley anymore.
Right.
When you had Barkley, you just run him or throw to him. Like it was just all Barkley, right?
Right.
Like the fact that Jones is actually throwing now, like makes me more confident, not only in neighbors, but the fact that they do want to throw the ball more.
Yeah, that's fair.
Because back in the day, Ward Sucks can fall under a vast array of different definitions. But, a majority of people think that Daniel Jones sucks. But I think it was just because he literally had nobody to work with. Like, Slayton was, like, the best wide receiver they had outside of Barkley for the longest time.
Yeah. Well, in all fairness, there's a lot of guys who went over there who literally became their 4th or 5th receiver that were good elsewhere because I do think Jones has been terrible. I think he's been pretty dreadful throughout his career. He does have upside in general for DFS. He's always a fun guy because he's got upside because he runs, and he's willing to gamble a little bit. But this is him playing for his job. I mean, if they don't end up like with 8 wins this year, I don't think he ever quarterbacks again as a starting quarterback unless somebody wants to do the reclamation project like with Sam Darnold. That's possible. We didn't talk. Yeah, I hear you, MJ. I think we reach with these things, but the Turpin thing is maybe not reaching because I don't like his price. I don't know. It feels a little too weird. I think Tolbert is the better of the thing is, even if a guy runs a touchdown back, you got to get fantasy points. You know what I mean? That's 6 fantasy points. That's not like you're not going to be on the winning lineup. And these guys aren't like 200. If they're 200, they have 6 fantasy points. Great, like Hall did on Monday night. That was in the optimal, But when you have guys who are like 4K, like Turpin, I don't really know what we're doing playing that. But I do think Tolbert is maybe a name we didn't mention enough. That's the one that I'm going to take a quick look at my exposures right now. Yeah, right now I've only got him at 12% in my lineups. I think I would like to be over the field on him. He's in a funky price, which is making him hard to play. But they've looked for him a lot this year. The problem is they've also had game scripts that let that happen for him. They've been getting crushed in the last 2 games. So he was effective in those situations. I don't think this is going to be the same game script at all. But as a low-owned play, I think it's definitely worth gambling a little bit on. I'm never going to say no to a guy who's going to be on the field who they've actually looked at. And I'm looking now. I do have 2 Tolbert captain lineups. They're very. I mean, it feels very thin, but that is I guess 2 out of 40 is where I have them. So that's 5%. All right, Brandon, anything else before we get out of here? I'm going to go finish up my builds, and I'll update the Discord on what I'm doing. We'll see if it works. But so far, the Showdown slates have actually done pretty well for me. The 2-gamer did not do so well because I was way too high on Jacksonville, as we talked about. Any final thoughts before we get out of here, though?
Dude, I can't believe I cashed that freaking game.
That's crazy.
That's insane. I couldn't believe it. Lastly, with I listen to shows or whatever on these days, but I would argue the best people to listen to for Showdown are the Occupy Fantasy guys, Brian Jester and their group. And typically their underperforming wide receiver is usually a really, really good play. And since we're talking Turpin and these guys down here that I have like no interest in, if you were looking for a receiver that isn't Ferguson or Lamb from the Cowboys, it would probably be Brandon Cooks. Like, I'm not a fan of any of the guys other than Ferguson and Lamb from the Cowboys. But if I was going to play somebody, it would probably be Brandon Cooks because they are at least aware, or not aware, but typically their model looks at players who have underperformed in recent weeks, either due to drop targets, air balls, whatever the case would be, but people who should have been performing much better than what they actually performed at. And Brandon Cooks is their like guy tonight who has been underperforming. So I would use that to answer your question. If anybody's worried about like Tolbert or like who else do you like from Dallas, I mean, I think they're all ugly plays, but I would lean to Brandon Cooks just on that alone.
Yeah. I just wanted to point out, because Corey asked about if we're running builds. Like, I want to just throw something out here. Like, I like running builds and showing things and trying different things and showing the product off. When we start doing shows right before lock and we're running builds, I'm starting to wonder what our subscribers, people who actually are paying money, I feel like we're maybe giving away a little too much sometimes. So I'm not going to just fall into the running a build every single day right before lock. Just I wanted to make that kind of clear, because I know a lot of people come in and say, oh, run a build. What does this happen for the single match? What happens for this? And I'm like, okay, well, it's a little bit unfair to some of the people who are actually paying for the product when we get like within an hour of game time, I feel like. Love to do it on first looks. Happy to do it, whatever for baseball this time of year at the end of the season. Probably do it at the very beginning of the NBA season. But in general, not the thing I want to be doing every live before lock show. I like to do it sometimes, but again, we can't promise. We can't do it every night. Otherwise, we're kind of devaluing the product that we're actually offering for both Saberson and ourselves. So anyway, all right, Brandon, last words and we'll get out of here.
I don't really have anything else. I
love it when a show that happens that you talk almost as much as me. It's great.
Yeah, there you go.
I just get more words in per minute. That's the only thing I've got. I talk too fast. I don't know. All right, Brandon, always great to have you, buddy. Thanks for joining us. We'll hopefully bring us some good luck tonight, guys. We want to see some screenshots if anybody's got some sweats in the Discord, and hopefully we can bring one home.